Salams and welcome. I'm going to give you a short lesson today, and please explain this to your children and grandchildren on how to remember things. So whether you learn the Quran or you learn you're learning to study history or mathematics or social studies or philosophy or psychology, please remember I'm going to teach you very basically how to remember and how the brain works. There are two types of memories, one known as short-term memory, one known as long-term memory. So very briefly, as what I mentioned, I like to keep things simple. So let's do a little graph. In this graph, this line here, we're going to draw the x-axis and the y-axis. So this one, think of this as your memory line. So this is 100%. That's 100%. That is 50%. And that is 0%. Right. So let me explain. So this line means, say if you remember something, and if you remember it, say if you remember something right now, if I tell you, remember the name Jack and Jill, you remember the name, right? So if you remember the name Jack and Jill, you know it 100%. Say tomorrow I ask you the same question. You say, yeah, I remember there was Jack and I can't remember the second one. So that means you only know half the memory. So then you only remember half the word, that's 50%. And in a week's time, if I ask you, tell me the two names I told you about, you say, hey, I can't remember. I know it started with a J, but I can't remember. So then your memory there is 0. Right? So if you remember something immediately, that means you know it 100%. Then you forget it, half 50%, and then you forget it completely. That means time can be your enemy. So let's use another axis called time. This will call it 1 day. After one, my pen is gone very dry. Let me just try and find another pen. Okay, here's another pen. So here's time, 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, and 1 week. Right? So now we have two axes. We have the one axis telling us how much I remember of something. I told you to remember Jack and Jill. Yes, I remember it. Now that is known as short-term memory. If I tell you something now, the brain will remember it only for a short while, because the brain doesn't like to keep unnecessary things in the brain, right? Because you need to clear unnecessary clutter. Like, for example, let us say you're phoning a customer care service and you're trying to change your dress. You want to try and buy a new outfit for your dress, and you want to change your outfit to a new outfit. And the person tells you 566237. Dial this number and then you'll get your customer care. So you remember the number 566237. You dial it, but the next day you don't need that number. You just needed it for that one period. You don't need it in a year's time. It's not an important number. In that particular case, the brain says, okay, I will store it in short-term memory. You will remember it for 5 minutes only, or you'll remember it for 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, you'll forget it. You won't remember it because it's not an important number. If you see someone's number plate, it's not an important number, so you'll forget about it. That's known as short-term memory, right? But if something is important, you want to put it in long-term memory. So if you are studying for your exams, you have got a history exam or philosophy exam or anatomy exam, you know that at the end of the year, they're going to ask you questions on that exam. Then you can't have short-term memory. Right? Then you need long-term memory. And this is where many people make a mistake. A student will know something very well. And the parents, I've seen so many parents asking me problems, asking me questions. They say, my child studies, she knows everything perfectly. But by Monday morning, she doesn't know. She fails the exam. And the reason is very simple. The reason is if you learn something today, you will know it at 100%. This is known as 100% learning. But after 1 day, it'll go down 50%, 20%. After 1 week, you won't know what is happening, right? This is normally what happens in any type of memory, right? Because if you remember something now, you will remember that thing. But after a short while, you're going to forget it. So how do you solve that problem? Let me just use a green, a different color pen. Okay. The way to solve the problem, this is known as short-term memory. You're going to forget everything. You're going to know something very well today. But in a day's time, you'll only know half of it, and then you'll forget everything completely. This is normal for everyone. It doesn't matter who you are, right? So the way to solve this problem is that if you know that your memory is going to fall down here after 1 day, your job is to revise that work immediately on this 1 day. You revise it at 2 days. You revise it at 3 days. And then every week, you keep on revising it, and then once a month you revise it. So by the time the end of the year exam comes, you will know that information. The green line refers to long-term memory. That's your long-term memory. Your black line refers to your short-term memory. So please remember, your child can study very well today. If you're going to test your child, she'll know everything. She'll know all the answers. You'll say, hey, you know your exam. You know everything is brilliant. But by Monday morning, in 3 days' time, when she's writing the test, instead of getting 100% for the exam, she barely gets 40%. And you say, what happened? Then you say, maybe I was stressed out. I didn't know what happened. I knew my work so well. It's because, yes, she knew the work very well on day one. But if you don't revise the work, so you must please remember, on day one, revise your work. On day two, revise your work. On day three, then every weekend, revise your work every weekend. Now, it's not possible. How do you do that? It's not possible to take the whole entire thick textbook and revise it every weekend. You can't do that. And the way to solve that problem is, as what I mentioned before as well, the way to solve that problem is how? Very simple. You need summary notes. You need notes. You need notes and you need index cards, right? Index cards. So what you do, you write keywords. Notes and index cards, that's your key. So you study a paragraph, and from that entire paragraph, you take out one word or one line. You say, okay, this is the most important word, or this is the most important line in that paragraph. You take a whole page. You say, okay, what is it? You just take one key word from every paragraph. So out of a page, you only write down 5 words from that entire page. From an entire chapter, if there's 20 pages in that chapter, you must reduce that chapter to only one page. Only one page. So if a book got 100 pages, right, you must reduce that only to 10 pages. Right? Reduce it to 10%. So every work that you got, your notes must be only 10% of the work. So then if you only have 10% of the work, so the weekends you're only revising this 10%. And the way the examiner is going to test you, as long as you got the main key words in that 10%, you're going to pass your exams. You're going to get your A and you're going to be B, as long as you know that's the main part of the work. And the second secret I'm going to give you is that please go through past exam papers. Past exam papers. Please, this is very important. Tell your children, please go through past exam papers. That will tell you what are the important topics that your professor is interested in. You must go through past papers. They will tell you this topic is important, that keyword is important, and you'll see year after you go through the past 5 years or 10 years, the same questions will come up over and over again. So you don't have to study the entire book. You only focus on that which the professor or the teacher thinks is important. And that is where you work. The philosophy there is work smart. Don't work hard. Otherwise, you're going to study the whole book. You'll know everything little bit. But the other children are getting the A's and the distinctions, and you wonder how they're doing it. They're doing it because there's a method. There's a technique. And the secret is go through your past papers. You go through your past papers, and your teacher will tell you that is important, that is not important. So instead of wasting time on the not important things, every weekend, you just revise the important topics. And in that way there, before you know it, you will get your distinction and you'll get your gold medal. Stay well. Look out. Please share this with your children and your grandchildren. Stay well. Look after yourself. We're going to make South Africa a better place. Education is the key. Whether it's South Africa, whether it's Africa, whether it's the world, education is the key to success in life. In any field you want to do, you must educate yourself. Let's remove the chain around our brain. And we always say that reading is vitamin tonic for the brain. Please remember, studying is not easy. But the harvest is very beautiful. You've got to plant the seeds for that harvest. And the fruits of that harvest, the fruits of that struggling is very beautiful and tasty. Stay well. Look after yourself. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.